Welcome to episode 15 of A Gamer Looks at 40. My name is Bill Tucker, as always, and this is Side Quests Volume 2. Now, you may be wondering why I'm doing a Side Quests episode in the middle of our Super Nintendo retrospective. And quite honestly, I was going to wait on it, wait till we got through the SNES, maybe through the Genesis, which we will talk about, and, kind of get past the Bit Wars and then do it. But you know what? I wanted to get these stories out there. People are kind enough to take their time and trust me with these stories, and I didn't want to wait another, month and a half before getting these out. So here we are, our compilation episode of cool little stories, vignettes, and anecdotes that didn't quite make the main shows for length reasons or fit reasons or variety reasons or laziness reasons. That could be part of it too. Without further ado, we're going to join Andrew Craig, who was featured on his amazing Zelda episode, how he talks about the first system he ever owned. And my God, it's an old one. Let's listen in. I was kind of going through some of the stuff you had sent earlier. You grew up born in 1982, grew up with an Intellivison?
Yes, I had an Intellivison. Out of all the systems, that's the one that my dad deemed was the most technologically advanced.
Nice.
So that's what we had.
Nice. And you have some early memories of playing that?
Oh, as many as you can, given how
Fair.
ridiculous that system was. that and the Action Max, which nobody seems to remember.
What is an Action Max?
The Action Max was very similar to the Intellivison in that it was an archaic machine, but the way that it worked was you popped a VHS tape into your VCR, and the system had two guns, and so you would play shooting games based on where in the VHS you were.
Huh.
I think they released 4 games for it, and that was it. And they weren't even games, they were VHSs.
Interesting. That's really I'm just trying to picture how that would work, and I'm failing miserably.
Hit up YouTube and watch Pops Ghostly, and It is absolutely bizarre.
That is bonkers. So instead of even a Sega Master System, no, Intellivision was where it's at. My uncle had an Intellivision, so I have connection with that as well. But he had it forever, and we long had Nintendo and Super Nintendo. But every time we went to his house, we'd go down there and play, Dracula on the
Masters of the Universe and Burger Time.
Yep, absolutely. Have little sleeves, right? Those little liners that go inside the number pad. Yeah, I got a lot of fondness for that. Yeah, it's a fun, relatively interesting story. My uncle was putting together a garage sale. You can see where this is going. And he was about to get rid of this thing for like $15 with all its games, everything. And I went to his garage sale to hand some stuff off that we were getting rid of as well. And I see this system like the Intellivision. And he's like, yeah, do you want it? And I'm like, well, I don't want it, but I know someone who does. And my best friend Joey is a collector. So I bought it for him for like $20. And so he now has an Intellivision with like 40 games with the liners and everything else. And as far as I know, it works.
Work?
Yep.
Yeah, that's my immediate question. You got to hand it to them. They knew how to solder joints back in the day.
Yes.
Like those things will never die.
It still works. I'd have to confirm that, but last time I asked him about this, he said, "Yep, still fires right up. Play a little Burger Time, like you were saying." So,
as far as other NES games I really loved, I was of that perfect generation where, of course, Mario 3 was like a game changer.
Right. Yeah, Mario 3.
We all needed that yellow box.
The yellow box was it. I was a Mario 2 guy, or a kid rather, but Mario 3.
Oh, see, I loved Mario 2. In hindsight, as an adult, I prefer Mario 2 to Mario 3.
Bless you. Thank you.
It's so much weirder. It's so much more interesting. It has so many more mechanical little things to figure out.
The kinesthetics of it are
Mario
just
1 and Mario
yeah.
3. Mario 1 and Mario 3 work. Mario 2 you have to figure out.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. It's an excellent way of putting it. Yes. I do love Mario. I love the kinesthetics of it. The picking things up and throwing it at another thing. the sound it makes when it collides, it just feels so good. Like everything just.
Well, and the music.
Oh, the music's phenomenal.
The music is just great.
Yeah, the music's great. I think the bosses are actually good as opposed to not great in other Mario games.
Yeah, well, I mean, the other Mario games, it's sort of palette swapped versions of the same thing.
Yeah,
all of the Koopa kids are all extremely similar mechanically.
Right. I've said this on the show and other places too, but I just feel like that bosses should be quizzes and final bosses are final exams, and they should test you on what you've done so far. And Mario bosses don't do a very good job of that because the skill set is so small in Mario that the airship is the final exam for that level. They're beautiful. They're levels. That's what Mario designers make amazing levels. It's what they do. And then the boss at the end is just, all right, well, jump on his head 3 times, throws him some sort of thing at an angle. Like it's not testing you in anything really. Whereas in Mario 2, it's a little more than that because the bosses are more varied. Like Mouser is such a badass. I love Bowser.
Throwing bombs at you.
Throwing bombs, and you have to kind of figure out the timing. You have to know the timing of the bomb to place it in the right place to... all that deciphering is so much more interesting and exciting in Mario 2. So, meet Andy, also known as Love Retro BTW on Twitter. He's the gaming community director for Stand Up to Cancer. Community is a word I can't say clearly, so we're just going to have to deal with that pronunciation. He's the host of Cafe BTW, which is a podcast/Twitch stream that airs on Saturday mornings. Really fun hour-long show where he talks to a variety of interesting people about games and a variety of topics. One of my favorite ones I caught was about a month and change. He was talking about VR, which is a subject I know very little about, but I learned a lot. So awesome show, and is a really good dude, just an all-around good egg. So he is actually going to be heavily featured in our retro collecting shows, which are coming up soon, probably in a couple of months. But I wanted to feature some of his first impressions of video games, where he first caught the bug, and some of the systems and titles he fell in love with. Let's listen in. But early on, what were some of the games that really connected with you? Especially like with your family. It sounds like you have siblings. Is that correct?
I had I have a lot of siblings, but I didn't have like so my dad remarried and he had 4 more kids, but I had an older brother, so growing up it was me and my older brother were just like, buddy video game, brothers that got to live in that generation.
Right.
And experience something that, I always say when I'm doing my stuff, it's like I wish a lot of these newer generations could feel that feeling, because I don't know if it's the same feeling. I don't know. But
I wonder. Yeah.
What games really influenced me? Well, the first game I remember playing was Kung Fu for Atari 2600.
Ooh.
That's like the one I remember playing and I could like tell you right now and visually see me like watching my brother and then like playing, because the Atari 2600 controller was simple to use. So when I was young, really it's one button and moving a thing, So then I think when like the Legend of Zeldas and the Super Mario Brothers of the world kind of came out and really just started like to drive my love of gaming, and I realized this is something I like really love. And I want to be sure to mention that the arcades in the 80s, my parents took us to a place you might know called Funtime Pizza or Showbiz Pizza.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yep, Showbiz.
And I think a game from there that reminds me is playing Gauntlet in the arcade.
Ooh, that's a good one.
That's probably one that I visually like remember, and I played at Showbiz Pizza. And if you're in North Jersey, then it was like off Route 4.
Yep.
Or something like that.
Something along those lines, yeah, for sure. It's had the creepy bear and all the animatronics, if I'm not mistaken. Yep.
Yeah, really, really, really interesting. And I can't remember if the pizza was good, but it probably wasn't. But I was just a kid.
Not.
But stuff like that, man. Like I was very diverse in my like love of gaming. I played all types. I think one game from the NES I really loved was Star Tropics. That's one I can pick out for you and remember that I just like loved this game. It blew me away.
Yeah, it's a fun, quirky one. I actually played that for the first time maybe last year. I never had it as a kid. And man, what a delightful game. Yeah, it's got some quirks to it that I wasn't a big fan of, but man, it has so much good flavor to it and so much originality. It's just a fun little vibrant game. It's a good pick. Cool. So you mentioned the Atari 2600. It kind of sounds like that's where your first entry point into gaming was. Kind of what was the progression from there? I'm assuming NES and kind of just moving up from that way.
Yeah, so being a kid of the 80s, like the best perspective to give you is that I was a kid of the 80s and I went to high school in the 90s, right? So I spanned those two amazing generations for gaming. So after that, yeah, my parents bought my brother an NES on his birthday, and it was 1985. I was very young, but my brother got it. And then for the next couple of years, man, before the 16-bit generation, me and my brother played hours and hours of NES in our basement. We had a stack of NES games like that went like above the TV. And
oh man,
we were very lucky. My parents, were cool, and they didn't mind that we played video games, and obviously we would always ask for that for our birthdays and like holidays, So, so yeah, man, it started there and then just exploded after that. Went to the NES, the Genesis, every console you could imagine. I had my fingers on, even the Neo Geo console we got at Funko.
Get out of here!
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
I don't have it anymore, but I wish I
did. Yeah, right. That'd be a sweet part of your collection.
So on top of that, I do want to mention that I have a huge connection, and I think we talked about this offline, with PC gaming too. So, my dad was very forward thinking with like computer technology. So we had like the Apple IIe's, we had the Commodores of the world. I was playing point-and-click adventure games in the early 90s on PC. I played Diablo. I played Wing Commander, and like TIE Fighter, all that stuff. So as you can hear, it spans a lot of depth.
Yeah.
So.
Jeremy, who tweets and streams under the moniker Ducks in Disguise, shares some of his love for the early Nintendo games, the Game Boy itself, playing with his family, and an unfortunate purchase when he was a young lad. I kind of want to start off with your love of that 8 to 16-bit era. Mm-hmm. What was your first entry point into that era, and kind of what are some of the games or systems that really impacted you?
Yeah, so I've been playing video games since I've been making memories. There are photos of me holding NES controllers or opening new games on Christmas or whatever, and I can't remember them. I'm so little. So from the moment I came into the conscious world, I've been loving video games. Nice. So the earliest ones I remember are going to be Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt. Of course, every kid with an NES played the heck out of those games.
Oh, yeah.
And then also a lot of Excite Bike and the early Mega Man games, so like Mega Man 1 and 2 were big for me as a kid. But yeah, the NES was kind of where it started for me. My dad was really supportive of, video games. He played a lot himself. He always had to have the new console or whatever came out.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so the NES was huge. We played a lot of games together, just a lot of memories there of family and video games. Also, of course, just the games themselves being lots of fun and losing myself in them for hours, but family was huge too.
That's cool. That's nice, because I hear both sides of the fence. Some people will say that their parents weren't too into it. They were supportive enough, but they weren't engaged. But it sounds like your family, it was a real family activity, really. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Jumping ahead a little bit to like the PlayStation era, I remember when Resident Evil came out, my dad brought that one home, and the whole family, it was like at night, we had the lights out, everybody's watching Resident Evil and getting scared at the old 32-bit graphics. But yeah, it was definitely kind of a family event when a new game that everybody was excited about would come out. Even my mom would would at least watch us and shake her head,
Cool. Do you have brothers and sisters, I'm assuming?
Oh, yeah. I'm the middle child of 7. Big family.
Wow. Big family. Okay. So y'all got together and trading off the controller, I'm sure. Was there ever any conflict between who was going to play next? And
Oh,
And
yeah.
How did that work out?
Oh yeah, all the time. Especially when we had just like the NES and the Atari, there was always a fight over who was going to play NES. We tried to maximize our time by playing like Double Dragon or something like that.
Sure.
Something we could play co-op. But yeah, it usually ended up to where my older brothers would get their pick of the console, and then me and my little brother, we would be like, all right, we'll play Atari for a bit. That's fine.
That's cool. That's cool that you had multiple at least. So I'm sure the Game Boy was probably a big deal for you guys that way. Because, that had to have been a big deal for you guys, just as far as sharing.
Yeah, the Game Boy was a lifesaver because, when all the consoles were busy, it was like, okay, I'm just going to grab the Game Boy and go chill on the couch for a bit. That's fine. That's love awesome. That little brick. That's one of my favorite consoles, handhelds, anythings of all time. I love the Game Boy.
It's amazing. Every time I talk to somebody, although the Game Boy episodes are done, quote unquote, people still want to talk about that Game Boy. People still love that Game Boy. It's amazing how this little brick, like you said, did so much. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really simplistic piece of hardware, but the games themselves, what they did with it, super impressive. They really maximized the potential of that little thing.
Yeah, they sure did. With the Game Boy, what were some of your memories of playing it? Not only what you played, but where you played it.
Yeah, so one of the clearest memories I have of the Game Boy was I was with one of my friends and we were going to see like a college football game. His older brother was in college and we were going to see the game. And on the way there, it was thunderstorming. Like we were terrified, little kids at this point. And it was just lightning, thunder, pouring rain. But I had my Game Boy and we had Super Mario Land 2. So we sat in the back and we played through, we had a long drive. So we played through pretty much the entire game, on the way there. When we got there, it was still raining. So we just sat in the car and a little bit, played a few more levels, but yeah, platformers are huge for me, so Super Mario Land 2 on the Game Boy was like, that was my road trip game, and I just remember being like, oh man, it is so nasty outside. But then when we had the Game Boy out, just time flew by. Totally forgot about it.
And you were able to kind of immerse yourself into something else, right? That at least that's what it sounds like, not to put words in your mouth.
No, exactly. It was, you can get, as silly as it sounds, it's a game about a plumber and and eating mushrooms and flying around with bunny ears. But you can get lost in just the fun of it. There's a certain simplistic beauty to Game Boy games and all those older generation games where, it's run to the right, get to the end. Mm-hmm. I've always really appreciated that. Even to this day, the games I play most are those classic 2D side-scroller platformers.
Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it. It's this kind of beauty and simplicity where it seems it's doing a lot with very little, right? It's really pretty impressive what that system was able to do, for sure. I always liken arcades to be like was definitely a social place. We were talking about, it was a place where kids could be kids, with very little adult supervision. It wasn't a place for adults. It was for kids to go and play games and be competitive. And for, at least for like me, where a kid who's not really good at sports, for example, can actually compete and win at something, So I always love hearing about stories about the arcade experience. It's very kind of almost romantic in the way that just kids got together and interacted in this kind of shared space.
Right. Yeah. There's so many I'm being flooded with memories right now of the arcade.
Fire them out. I'm into it.
Yeah. So many good times from just little arcade shops like that one at the bowling alley. We even had a couple there was like this mini golf course in town and they sold ice cream in this little hut or whatever. And they had a claw machine and the first Tekken game, arcade machine in there. And that was when I was introduced to 3D fighters. And I was like, what is this? There's a guy with a cheetah head beating the crap out of people. This looks interesting. So, you pop in a few quarters and then, $20 later, I'm like, all right, I love Tekken.
Tekken rules. I'm into this.
Yeah. But one, I was betrayed by one arcade. It's a very kind of a disappointing, sad story. So I played Primal Rage in the arcade and I loved that arcade game. It was dinosaurs fighting each other. Mortal Kombat style. I was like, this is perfect.
What
as
else?
a kid, it was
What
like,
else do you need?
yeah, this is the best. And I found out they made a Super Nintendo version. I was like, oh, I am getting this. Absolutely. I worked all summer just saving up what little allowances I had, because these games were like $80 back then,
Yeah.
Super Nintendo games weren't cheap. So I saved up all summer. I bought a brand new copy, brought it home, and it is so not the arcade version.
No, it's not. It really isn't.
So
oh no.
I felt so betrayed. I was like, oh no. I mean, I still love the arcade version. The PS1 version is pretty close to that. But I just remember being so disappointed as a kid, having spent all that time saving that money, all that anticipation for like 3 months, and then bringing home that thing.
It's funny. We we all have moments in our life when we realize that disappointment is real, like real disappointment. That something you love may not be all it's cracked up to be.
Yep.
My brother's funny. My brother has a moment where he has a friend who learned that with Jurassic Park 2, because he loved Jurassic Park, and then he saw Jurassic Park 2 as a kid, and he realized, oh no, life can be disappointing. I can be disappointed in life. This is not good.
Yep. Life finds a way. Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds like Primal Rage was one of your kind of like, oh, I've been kind of kicked in the teeth a bit. This really sucks.
Yep. That was the biggest I think gaming disappointment I've ever had to suffer. Very few of those, but that was one of them.
That's
yeah,
a bummer,
for sure.
man. That's a bummer. Any other items in your collection that would be, I'll say, noteworthy, but either connects with you on a very personal level?
Yeah. So I would say the most rare thing in my collection, and also the most deeply personal to me, because it is tied to a pretty amazing experience, is the Ghostbusters 1 and 2 NES cartridges I have signed by Ernie Hudson.
Wow.
So
cool.
Yeah, so I met an actual Ghostbuster, and he signed my Ghostbusters games for me. Coolest guy I've as far as like celebrity or whatever that I've ever talked to. Super down to earth. He took time to like talk to me aside from the panel and the meet and greet and all that stuff, just to say hi and talk about. We talked about his thoughts on success and a little bit about his career and all kinds of stuff. And then I was like, I hate to do this, but I have these here. would you? He's like, oh yeah, no, this is great, and he signed them both. So
neat.
To have Ghostbusters, anything signed by a real Ghostbuster, that means a lot. It's one of my favorite franchises.
That's cool. That's very cool. I've heard nothing but good things about Ernie Hudson. He's just very available and approachable. That's really cool. Very neat.
And his panel was really cool too. It was at like a gaming convention. There's a retro gaming convention in my state. And yeah, he was there, along with the voice of Duke Nukem. that was quite
good.
The panel.
Next up, Steve Luzader tells us the story of his initial days of playing in the arcade and some of the less than scrupulous friends he made there.
As entry point into gaming, man, the stories have me going back probably as early as about 5 years old. My mother would tell stories, and she still does. It tells them a lot better than I do, of me, pounding quarters at the arcade machines at the local bowling alley where they used to bowl back when I was that young. And some of the funny stories go back to, as I was pretty good even for a 5-year-old. And, we're talking about 1983-ish here. So, the advent of the arcade was still a pretty new thing. So for a 5-year-old to be as good as I was kind of astounding. And like all of the stoners and thugs in the pool hall that was like just adjacent to it, when they would see me there, used to come out and kind of crowd around me and watch me play, because it was just kind of so cool to see somebody that good at them. And while I doubt that this is accurate, my mother likes to embellish a little bit or something, but she'll tell stories. She'll tell stories too of like at one point, like one of the thugs would come out to meet them at the bowling lanes with like the chair I would stand on in one hand and me in the other, be like, "This is Luzader. He's out of quarters." So that's probably actually like where I really started. And probably wasn't long after that. I had an Atari 2600 home system.
Very nice.
In my first house. And I remember playing Dig Dug and Crystal Castles, Pac-Man. I had I had a pretty nice selection of some of those little games, and we just kind of progressed from there. I've never really been out of gaming much since then. We went through the Nintendo era and the Super Nintendo area, and then jumped onto the PlayStation route, and we've been driving through that part of town ever since then.
Right on, man. Well, that's really, really cool. I love the image of almost like a cartoon of this, like, pool tough with you in one hand, a chair in the other. Excuse me, needs more quarters. He's fun to watch, play video games. That's awesome, man. I love that anecdote. That's pretty cool. Next up, Daryl, also known as Mr. Thou on Twitter, MYSTER Thou on Twitter, tells us a bit about his first entry point into playing games, playing Wheel of Fortune as a 4-year-old, Mario 3 competitions, and a wish that made everyone's life just a little bit brighter. Let's listen in. So cool. So we were chatting a bit before we started recording. You live currently in Saskatchewan, Canada.
That's correct, yeah.
Is that where you're from originally?
Yeah, born and raised, and
Cool.
never left.
Never left. That's awesome. Very good. So tell me a bit about kind of what your earliest, I would say, gaming touch points. I stopped asking people about their first games because they're like, I don't know, I was 4. I don't remember those things. So it was kind of your first entry point into video games that you can recollect.
Well, being 4, I actually do remember some of my first moments.
There you go.
There was a Commodore. No, was it a Commodore? VIC-20. Yeah, I think that was made by Commodore. There was those tape games or something.
Yeah.
I think Wheel of Fortune was a game that I remember playing on there with my dad, which I think he may have written some code in there at some point, because one of my earliest memories of that game was my sister's name was one of the puzzles in the game.
Oh,
and
wow.
I just remember being very shocked by it and thought, oh, wow, like my sister's name is in there. And I never really got the explanation, but now as an adult I think back and think, oh, he must have coded in that game or something, but I'll never get to ask him now, though. But, that's a different story.
For sure. That's interesting, though. That's kind of odd. Was your dad into like programming and such, or was it more?
What? I don't know. But as an adult now, when I think about it, like maybe he was
like a hobbyist of some sort that made that happen. Yeah,
I guess. Yeah, but it's not something he ever pursued. I guess, obviously.
Sure.
Even in my teenage years, when he was still around, I never really asked about it.
Now my question is, if you were 4, how were you playing Wheel of Fortune? Wheel of Fortune. Still, that's a little advanced for a 4-year-old. How did that work out?
Well, it was. I can barely picture it in my head, though. It was just kind of showing up on the screen. There were just squares on the screen and the letters on the keyboard.
Fair enough.
It was kind of an introduction to how the keyboard works and the placement of the letters and how to spell, I guess. I was 8 when this video Armageddon happened. I live in a small city, so the turnout wasn't huge. I think there was only like maybe 30 or 40 people in the church playing 2 different consoles of Mario, 2 different televisions, and we all waited in line and stuff. And I ended up only getting second place in the game because I got all cocky. I was like, because I played that game so much up until that point, and I knew exactly what to do, where I was going, and at the time it was only supposed to be the highest score would be the winner and stuff, and I was just smoking everybody so bad, and I was like, oh, this is too easy, what am I doing? I got all cocky and I grabbed a warp whistle and warped to World 3, which is the underwater level where there is no opportunity for points whatsoever.
No.
And I just kind of, messed myself over with that one and only ended up getting second place. But I thought, I think back and realize how funny it was.
That's crazy.
This isn't challenging enough.
I know exactly how to do this, but I'm going to do this with literally one hand tied behind my back. Don't mind me. I'm just going to put on the frog suit and walk around here. Yeah, wow. That is... Man, that's unfortunate. Was there a prize?
Yeah, it was just a tiny little prize. The
Okay.
first prize was like 10 free video game rentals or something like that, and
I love that.
I think the second
That's cool.
prize was 1 free video game rental or something. It was a small town Armageddon.
Yeah,
thing.
a small town competition, but that's still pretty cool. I like that. That's neat that you had that little taste of competition.
And then I realized how cockiness can get you nowhere.
So we're talking about games teaching you things. Games taught you that don't warp whistle to World 3 if you actually need points in order to win.
Exactly. I tell myself that Mario only exists because of a wish I made in a coin fountain at a fancy restaurant back when I was 5 or 6. or 4.
Those things are magical.
Yeah. So it was
it
1989 or something like that, and I loved Mario 2. That was the very first game for the NES that I played. My
Okay.
dad brought home a Nintendo, and Mario 2 was a part of it, bundled with it or something, I guess. And
Nice.
I just played the crap out of that game, and I loved it so much. Like, it was a Mario Brothers 3, and I threw a coin in a fountain, and then a few months later, it existed. And I like to convince myself that I'm the reason it exists, even though it already existed in Japan at the time.
Thank Daryl for Mario 3. If through his wish birthed that classic game for us. That's pretty awesome.
Well,
man.
just the American release, anyway. At least.
Oh, okay. So you thank him for ensuring that game came over here.
Yes, you're welcome.
Yes, the great importer. That's cute. That's a cute memory, right? Like all those little things that we kind of make up for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. Next up, Mike Alberton, all-around good egg and host of the Games My Mom Found podcast, shares some stories of the unusual items he brought to show and tell.
That kind of fits with the SNES era. Yes, I want to say I was in 3rd grade. It was like a show and tell where you go, and many kids had you bring stuff to show to the class. And I brought player's guides. I don't remember which guides I had, but I brought a bunch of player's guides to school. And that's actually how I met a friend of mine that I kept in contact with through all of elementary school and middle school and high school, and then we lost contact as we both left Wisconsin. But we met because I brought players' guides to school, and that's how we having a pretty good friendship for a long time.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. You were bringing in players' guides. Cool.
Yeah, that's when he started talking to me, and then we stayed friends for a while.
That's awesome. Cool. And you guys went to the same school and all, or
The same elementary school. We went to different middle schools, different high schools, but we kept in contact.
That's awesome. That's really fun. Did you? Were they Nintendo Power?
No, I don't remember what they were. I used to buy a lot of guides, even for games that I wouldn't play the game, but I would still just buy the guide because I wanted the guide. So
guides are awesome. Players' guides are super cool. They're a lot of times the artwork is gorgeous in them, and they're just fun to read through, to kind of flick through them. Yeah, I don't feel bad about buying guides. Guides are awesome. They can be, at least.
I'd buy guides for games that I was never going to play, but I just like having the guide to look at. Like Star Fox 64 was one that I bought the guide for, and I didn't play the game until the show last year, or the first year of the show.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's funny. But it's still pretty neat it's kind of a cool thing to have, for sure. I have a few, but I think they're pretty interesting. Remember the days of renting games? If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably in the same age bracket as I am, and the answer, of course, is yes. Do you remember having some horror stories of renting games? As I'm listening back to this could be its own episode, because I'm sure everybody has some sort of nightmare when it comes to Blockbuster or Hollywood Video or wherever you got your games. But the fellas at the New Dad Gaming Podcast, Jeff and Trevor, share some of their horror stories in the rental section.
I think what supported that too was I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but how many games were available to rent. Like I remember with SNES, for me, it was really the pinnacle of renting games.
Absolutely.
Like run on down to the store and there's just this massive catalog of like, oh, I'm going to try this. Okay, I'm going to try this. Turtles in Time. That's amazing. Let's do this. So much, like you say possibilities, and then loading cartridges, like slamming it in, but just having access to so many of them, it was flooded. It was awesome.
Jeff, did you do a lot of renting back in those days?
Oh yeah, tons of renting. I remember the shelves on. It was like we had a Jumbo Video, and I think Blockbuster was around at the time. But Jumbo Video for the popcorn. You go in, and all the walls were covered with the boxes of SNES games, right? And I remember you would go in and you would have a mood. You were like, hey, I want to do this today, and it would be like Bomberman was there, or Mega Man X was there, and it was like everything could serve your needs, and maybe you get one or two if you were lucky, but it was just something that, like Trevor said, it was just accessible to all, and it had a lot of genres, a lot of choice, and even like the Japanese games that were coming over and being quickly, more, I guess, translated into the Western world and English language. It was good to see that too, right? So,
yeah, that's pretty interesting. Now, did either of you make a big rental mistake? Because we've all made them, where you go to the rental store and you go to Blockbuster or Hollywood Video, where it was for when I grew up, and you go to the wall and you just pick something random, take it home, and this was a bad idea. Did y'all ever make that mistake?
I think, right off the top of my head, yes.
Okay.
And it was a game called, again, in my mind, a game called Bob. Like B.O.B.
Yep.
And I was like, you know what? He's a robot. He kind of looks neat. It was kind of like that Mega Man X kind of feel to it. I'm going to give this a shot. It was a bad game. I did not like it. It was super difficult. Like, I'm talking like Ninja Turtles hard. And it was frustrating. And I got it home and tried to get through it. And that was just one game I completely gave up on. It was just,
no.
And to a kid that spent, I don't know, $5-6 on renting it was just such a blow. It was just like, oh man, like that could have been like, I don't know, gum money or ice cream money, and it was just
or better game money,
or a better game money. That's right. So,
unless my memory is completely messed, I seem to recall renting. I think it was like the 7-Up guy. So there's Cool Spot was a pretty decent one. That was okay. There's another one though, maybe a Sprite. He was like this weird line art triangle guy. And
you got the offshoot 7-Up game?
The offshoot spot. So the offshoot brand, it's like the RC Cola of sponsored video games.
This was that Microplay, wasn't it?
It probably was. It was horrible, just like terrible. And the other one I'd pitch to you, it's terrible. It's bad for another reason, and that was Final Fantasy. Now, Final Fantasy is an amazing game, but you are not going to beat it within one rental period.
Right.
So you are setting yourself up for sadness because you're going to lose your save. There's no way it stays.
Yeah, that's anytime. Yeah, the role-playing game mistakes were exactly that, right? You can be like, oh, wow, I'm going to get like 4 hours into it. You're all into it. And then all of a sudden, I got to return it. And then you're like pacing around like to rent it again next week. Ooh, will my save still be there? Mm-hmm. No, it won't, young man. It will not be there. It's going to be gone.
And what I found with renting too, just as a quick note, is when it came in with the instruction booklets, and I had people, well, I remember, like ruin the game because they would write the ending in the instruction booklet. I'm like, there's a gamer code. You don't do this.
I've never experienced that.
Yeah. Just in pen, like kid writing, like he dies at the end. I'm like, whoa, this better not happen. Like, this better be a joke.
Who, those parents, really, I swear. Yes. Oh my God, how horrendous. Have you experienced?
Traumatizing.
That is traumatizing. That's horror. I'm shocked by that. By the notion that someone would do such a disgraceful thing. Trevor, have you experienced that yourself, or is this a Jeff only kind of thing?
I think that's a Jeff only thing. And it's probably his brother, let's be honest.
You wrote it in there, didn't you? You're the one.
And if anything, it'd probably be, if you're getting back that cartridge and you're hoping that your save file is there, but it's overwritten by like fart whistle 20. You're like, oh, all right, well, cool. Or, it's enough that your precious save has been written over, but then it's also in the most insulting manner possible. Like,
that's just brutal. Growing up, what was your first entry point into games? Let's kind of start there, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. So I think it would go way back, and it's funny. I can't really remember how it showed up or why it showed up, but it just seems like my dad showed up one time with a suitcase with an Atari in it. And
Wow.
yeah.
That's something out of a spy movie.
Yeah, right. And I think it would have been, at this point, Atari would have been probably over the hill. So it was definitely like a hand-me-down or a freebie. And just the weirdest games. Like, we're playing blackjack. And at the time, like I'm probably like 5 or 6. I have no idea how the game works. All I know is that if you hit the right buttons, you make the dealer mad. So I start to become aware of gaming when Atari's kind of about to sunset and the Commodore 64. So when I'm going to school, they have Commodore 64s everywhere. They want to teach you typing, but really what the kids want to do is just play games.
Right.
So that's kind of like the first touch points of games that I can remember.
That's interesting. It's interesting. Your dad had brought home the Atari, which is pretty neat. And then at school, so school, that's interesting because I think a lot of people forget. Again, I grew up in, where I grew up, we had computers in school by like 4th grade. We had computers in, a couple of, computers playing, Odell Lake, I think was called the fish game, or Carmen Sandiego was a big one as well.
Oh yeah,
yeah, all that edutainment. But that's interesting where a touch point would be at school. What games are you playing on the Commodore 64 at school?
Yeah, no, you exactly named. So there was I don't think there's much of a name of for. You might remember it though. It's where you're 2 gorillas and you're throwing bananas at each other.
No, I don't know that one.
Yeah, so it's a little bit edutainment because there's wind and you have to calculate how hard you throw it and what angle, and it has to go over top of buildings, and you're just trying to throw a banana at another ape. That's it. So it's you versus somebody else. Carmen Sandiego, like, man, you nailed it on the head. That game was everything. Teachers loved it because, look, they're learning geography. Kids, it was, a competition. The game was really well done for the time when you really think about it.
Oh, yeah.
The mystery and the drive to catch her. So I think for sure those two are the biggest pulls I can remember. Carmen Sandiego and the monkey game, we'll call it.
That's funny. It's interesting. We call it Carmen Sandiego. Those edutainment games were sneaky. They're sneaky. The good ones were sneaky. I always remember the fish one, Odell Lake, which was basically you would have your fish on the left-hand side, and then you'd have another fish on the right-hand side. And you had to make the decision to either try to eat the fish or leave based on the size of it and the type of fish it was. If you were a little minnow, of course, a mackerel would kill you, but does a trout beat a mackerel? Oh, let's find out. I don't know why that always just struck me as fun, but man, Carmen Sandiego. Bonus points. Do you remember the Carmen Sandiego game show?
Oh, I remember I never had one thing that's very poignant in my youth is that we really did not have a lot of TV. Like just to reset. We're up in Canada, and so we had like 3 channels via the satellite or the bunny ears on top of the set.
Sure.
Never had cable, but I would catch clips of it, so I knew it existed, never did watch it.
Interesting. Okay. Well, if you ever want to spend an hour on YouTube wasting time, but in a good way, look up the Carmen Sandiego TV show. It is glorious. It is amazing. I'll just leave it at that. If you haven't seen it or anybody else hasn't, it's required watching.
Okay. So let me pitch one back at you. Do you ever recall it was a game show, 3 kids, and it is either before the movie of the same title, I think like Whiz Kid or something, where the kid plays competitive Mario.
Yeah, it was the Wizard. The Wizard,
right.
Yep.
Now, there was a game show, though, and it was always like 3 or 4 people playing games, and it changed up every single time. And like awful host, the same type of corny, awful TV shows I remember from the 90s. And it would come up, okay, now we're going to play a round of this basketball. 2 kids like would play video games for the championship.
The only one I know of that is Nick Arcade, which was a Nickelodeon game show where it was similar. They had to answer trivia questions about games, and then they'd have challenges where they'd play arcade games to get a certain amount of points in a certain amount of time. And then the final, like if you got through all of that, you would go through like this VR game where you were actually in a game dodging things and trying to collect things.
Man, that might be the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah,
the VR part sounds wild.
Yeah, the Nick Arcade that was the game of choice there. That was the game show. And finally, we close with a triple shot of Joe Corio. Demo discs, summer vacation, and a conversation about the artistic nature of video games that devolves into pure senselessness. Any other memories of the SNES era or the Genesis era? Just that 16-bit world that you care to share as we kind of close out this section of it.
Summer vacations. Summer vacations. Those would be, if there was a word association, or two words, I should say, it was summer vacations. We didn't have a pool, and summers would get hot. They'd get very, very hot. If we were able to go outside and play street hockey, we would. But on days that it was 95, 99 degrees and you just couldn't, and you didn't have a pool, that's the summer vacations. And an endless summer, an ocean of time that only children can appreciate. I remember many, many basements that getting me through a lot of boredom. Both of those systems, Super Nintendo and Genesis.
Summer vacations were so sweet for getting games completed. And I remember when we were kids, we didn't have game backlogs. Remember that? Now all we do is have gaming backlogs.
Yeah.
There is something idyllic about, when it's 100 degrees out in August, and like you said, you don't have a pool, and who wants to be outside in that weather?
No one.
If you're like me, you're not terribly athletic. What else are you gonna do? It's what better way to kind of while away a summer afternoon sh evening is kind of disappear into this interactive experience, right? This interactive experience is a game that you can control and you can live within and interact with.
Yep.
It's interesting. People, I'll still have people in my life I can tell them that I can tell somebody at work that I binge watched WandaVision over a weekend. And they'll be like, oh yeah, it was a cruddy weekend now. Dude, that's awesome. Wasn't it great? Oh yeah, that's great. But if I told them I played 9 hours of a video game,
sure.
Like, oh my God, I got stuck in Breath of the Wild for 6 hours. I could not escape. They would look at me like I was a dork.
You're onto something. You're onto something. Yeah.
There's still a stigma that's attached with video games where it's considered something that's niche and dorky.
Yeah.
I would much rather play 2 hours of Mario Kart than watch 2 hours of Paw Patrols.
100%. I agree.
Because at least with Mario Kart, they're both pixie sticks. They're both just adrenaline rushes to the brain that young minds can't really handle.
Yep.
Which is why we have to be careful how much they play.
Of course.
But it's at least with Mario Kart, he's engaging his brain, his fingers, his timing, his sense of motor skills. He's involved as opposed to just absorbing a bunch of canines. Yeah. A bunch of canines screaming at him to buy more products and toys so he can scream at us to buy more toys for Paw Patrols.
I just got into this with my oldest son who had a sleepover recently, and you talk about binging streaming video, and they did. They stay 2 hours deep of Cobra Kai, and then they did a little bit of internet, and then they did a little bit of YouTube, and then they did a little bit of the tablet or the phone. And we didn't have any of this. And my son asked me that, like, what did you do during sleepovers? I said, there was one sleepover we had, I have every summer for my birthday. And it was my best friend, Bill. He would come over. And you're right. There was no way to stream Netflix or go to YouTube. He's like, so what would you do? We just played video games. We played video games all night long. We played video. You're not going to go prowl around at 11 o'clock at night, midnight, and you're not going to stream Cobra Kai on Netflix or do YouTube or any of these breaks that you could do. We played video games all night long. We started at 10 o'clock and we didn't stop until the sun came up.
That's it.
And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't trade it for anything because, like you said, it's hand-eye coordination. It's interactive. It's doing something with your friend. It's problem solving. A lot of them,
sure.
Especially the RPGs. I mean, those are real. Yeah. You said it best. I'd rather my son play a video game as opposed to binging something on Netflix. I feel the same way.
Yeah, I mean, my son is still kind of figuring out games. Like he's not quite ready for a lot of them because he gets frustrated really fast. I know you've said your sons do the same thing. So my thing with him is he can't throw a fit if he loses. If he gets third place in Mario Kart, he's not allowed to throw a fit. So I'm just controlling that and just watching that to make sure that he can enjoy it responsibly. But once he gets to a point where he can say, oh, crud, I got 5th place in Mario Kart, let me try again and do better. Or, just have that emotion be tampered down a bit, where he's not like just flying off the handle if he loses. I would much rather him play a game. And also, too, when you're talking about the sleepover, we were interacting with each other.
Yep.
Like if we're playing a game with each other, like I remember, and we save this maybe for another time, but I remember one sleepover. You had the Tekken demo disc.
It's funny. Everybody recites this memory. It's incredible. Yeah.
It's insane. It's a memory of psychopaths. You see. We played the demo disc of Tekken for hours.
Yeah.
Like drooling schmucks. We just stared at the screen.
So the backstory on that was the magazines towards the later part of the 90s, to entice you to buy them, they would include a demo disc in the magazine. That was a big deal. Like, oh wow, that was great. I mean, that was right at the end of retail newsstand, I should say, dying, and that was a great way to buy a magazine. Wow, I'm gonna get a demo disc with at least 5 to 6 games. And Tekken was one of those games. And you could only play the first stage, the first level. So the background was the same. You could only play 2 characters. And that was it. You had, 3 rounds maximum. 2 players would play. And then as the demo concluded, that was it. It would reset to the beginning. We played this all night. We played this all night long. I mean, it was 4:30 in the morning, and I'm like, guys, are we done with this yet?
Well, none of us had a PlayStation.
I don't know if we should be proud of this story or shamed.
It's a little of both. It's a little of both. You're the only one with a PlayStation. I don't think anybody else had one that was there. And of course, you and I stay up the latest.
Always.
Always the 2 of us.
Yeah.
We always close the bar. And your dad would yell down every 15 minutes, "Boys, you going to sleep?
Aren't you guys asleep yet?"
Are you guys asleep yet? Because he's like trying to fight off sleep on his own. He's probably up there on the chair.
That's right.
I can't let these kids just. And then he comes downstairs. And I don't know, I'm just reciting this memory, but after us playing till 4:30 in the morning, we finally fall asleep. All of a sudden, your dad comes down in like 3 hours with donuts.
A box of donuts. Yep. Yeah.
Always a box of donuts for us to eat.
We'd fall asleep at 5:30, 6, right when the sun was rising, like vampires.
Yes.
And then 2 or 3 hours later, it's still early. It's still 8:30 in the morning. We're running on nothing. We're running on 2-3 hours sleep. And there would be donuts there. Yeah, that's a good memory. Those are a good time.
They were. But the point of that, of course, is that when we were playing that Tekken game over and over again, like an episode of Groundhog Day, we were interacting as friends. We were building memories. If I sit there and watch a movie with you or the group of people, we're all in our bubbles.
Yeah, watching now, saying nothing. Right, 2 hours. The
saying
experience
nothing.
Is over. Yep, you're right.
Right.
You're right.
We're all, other than a communal experience of comedy, which I think does really require an audience to laugh, and it's just comedy's better with an audience. If you and I are watching a Marvel movie, we're just going to sit there and watch a movie. We're in our own bubbles. We're not engaging. But with a game, everyone's involved.
You're right.
Everyone, at least as many people who have a controller, and even those if you don't, you're cheering on somebody else. You're waiting for your turn. You're watching the game. It's just this great communal experience that I would get made fun of, kind of, sort of, low-key made fun of in a work environment with a coworker. And that's never happened, right? No one's going to be that rude, obviously. But in their back of their brains, they're probably saying, "Jeez, he's a bit of a dork."
Yeah.
Wow. He spent 8 hours playing a video game?
No.
Dude, you spent 8 hours staring at the screen.
Again, if you look at it differently, and that's the shift that we have to make. If you stop, not you, I'm saying, if people stop looking at it as just some stupid spare time, as opposed to a work of art, right? I mean, that's different. You could sit, to your point, and listen to the White Album for hours. You could sit and just look at works of art from Picasso for hours. And you're not going to get that same type of disdain. That's correct, because it's a work of art. And if you start looking at video games the same way, the communal experience, That's a great way to. That's a great way to say it. If we're watching a movie, we're not going to be interacting. We're not going to be talking. It would be considered rude to talk. Quiet. I'm trying to enjoy the movie. We're all in our little bubble, not saying anything. Whereas this demo blasted through the night, and we made games off the demo. Okay, well, who's the best of the five of us now? Is Eric better
Right.
than Joe? Is Carlos better than Bill? I mean, we created a tournament bracket, if you remember. We took this demo that provided nothing, and with our own minds and imagination, we made it something.
It's interesting that you kind of bring that up, and I'll take it one step further when it comes to games as opposed to other mediums. Games are the only interactive medium there really is. Every other medium's passive.
It's true.
So you sit and watch a movie, you sit and read a book, you sit and listen to music.
You sit and look at a painting, and you're quiet.
Right.
That's right.
Right. You just sit and you absorb the art and then you process it and do whatever. But video games you play.
Yep.
And that's why even if you don't think games are art, I think not every game is art, but I do think every game has artistic elements to it.
Of course.
But that's kind of just my opinion on it. Games can be art, but I don't think every game is necessarily art. Based on my personal definitions of a topic for another day. But I do think that even if you distill it down to just play,
sure,
play is important. It's vital. And guess what? As adults, we should be playing more, not less. Because I think play is so important for how our minds work, for creativity, for fostering new ideas. I could talk to somebody and they would say, "Oh yeah, we did a hike up a mountain this weekend."
Yeah.
And I'd say, "Wow, that's awesome. That's great." And that's a form of play in itself. It's a physical play. Or I played football with my friends,
It's
or I played
recreation.
soccer with
Yes.
my rec league soccer game was last week. "Oh, cool. That's awesome. How'd you do?" "Yeah, we lost." "Great." That's play, and that's good. Why can't video games be put in the same category as that sort of play? No, it's not athletic, right? It's not a physical form of play, but certainly a mental play is not those. I mean, I would say there's definitely a difference, but like if I said, "Hey, I got stuck into some Sudoku puzzles," no one's gonna look at me sideways. Maybe I spent 8 hours doing it, but. You know what I mean? So play
100%, of course.
Distilling games down just to play. Play is important and vital. And that's why as we get older, we lose a lot of that. That kind of just goes away into the ether because of life experiences and life's responsibilities. We don't have as much time to play as we did when we were kids.
No, that's
but play
exactly
is still vital. So I argue adults should play games more. Play more games. That's what I say.
100%.
Damn it.
100%. I'm with you.
And don't give me a sly look if I get stuck in Breath of the Wild. And she's like, "Look, I burned 6 hours playing Breath of the Wild. I don't even know where my kids were. Did I have kids? I don't know."
Great. No, I agree. We should be playing more, and there needs to be a paradigm shift of how games are perceived and viewed. I think you're seeing more of that now. You're seeing more of a shift to people recognizing that this is a work of art. Bobby Flay, he says that about his dishes that he makes when he cooks something.
Yep.
He says it's an art, and people just say, "You consider this art?" He says, "Of course, I'm creating it. I'm creating it." And the way he says it with such gusto, "I'm creating this."
Now, for Mr. Flay, I would say that not every piece of food is a work of art.
It's a work of art.
Because a work of art is a piece of creative work that is designed to elicit an emotional response. Right? So when Bobby Flay creates a beautiful dish, that dish is designed to create an emotional response from the person eating it.
Right.
The person eating it gets a beautiful flavor. It looks nice. It smells great. It tastes good. Those are emotional responses based on physical stimuli. So boom, that is a work of art. If I make my kid hot dogs and macaroni and cheese, and I throw it on the plate in front of him and say, "Eat this because I got nothing else for you," then that is not a work of art. That is intended to feed my child so he doesn't starve.
But isn't that everything? I mean, you could do a crap video game. That's not a work of art.
Of course.
You can write a jingle for a commercial. You didn't write a song.
Of course.
So just like anything, to your point, yes, it depends on, I guess, a work of art. Yes, you have to create something, but it also depends on, how much passion you put into it, and I guess what type of emotion that people can draw from it. So yeah, that would be my definition of art.
Yeah, and like a jingle, for example, is an excellent point. A jingle has artistic elements. It has melody, it has rhythm, it has lyrics, right? It has rhyme sometimes, right? But it is designed to elicit interesting and emotional response. So you do something. So it's actually designed to elicit a physical response, which is purchase this thing. But it plays upon your emotions to generate that physical response. So maybe a jingle can be art. And that's where you get into an entire episode about the nature of games and art. I could really do this. I will share with you. I could do this. Myself, the well-read mage who you've heard on this show before already. And and Joey, we'll get into games as art, and then what art is, and then we'll get into the nature of criticism, and if criticism is required for art to not survive, but if criticism is still valid in our era of opinions. And you will not want to listen to the show ever again.
Join us next time, Bill and Joey evolve and evoke the primordial emotional elements of artistic qualities and quantities.
Yes. The excuse me as I pardon me as I cite A.O. Scott's The Nature of Criticism. You see, page 48. I don't know. I can't even. We've devolved into senselessness.
That's where I live, man. I live there in the labyrinth of senselessness. I don't want to ever come out of it. I want to reside there in Mongo forever.
I am with a 5-year-old and a now 8-month-old. I am staring into the jaws of that land of complete mental dissonance. And I don't know whether to run or just jump in feet first.
There was one time
I don't know what to do.
When they were young, they were screaming at each other and they just wouldn't stop. So I started screaming also, and the show went crazy. She's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, they're not listening to me, so I'm just going to join in to the madness." It was great.
A therapist would say, "Remember, you are the adult," and I would say, "Remember, you weren't there." So right. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Thank you so much for listening to this compilation episode, this hodgepodge of stories and memories known as side quests here on A Gamer Looks at 40. If you enjoy the show, please check us out on Twitter at A Gamer Looks at 40. And if you want to be just grand supreme fan and friend of the program, write us a review on Apple Podcasts. All of the ratings and reviews and likes and listens are greatly appreciated. Thanks for listening.